It was just a preseason game, but man, the Pittsburgh Steelers looked good. We'll break down why that is and give you my thoughts here on their first win of the preseason over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here just on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content like this episode that's coming out on a Saturday. So, we hope you enjoy it. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, I know it's just the preseason, and I know we're not supposed to overreact, and we won't overreact in this show, not even one little bit. But man, that offense looked good, didn't it? It felt good seeing Kenny Pickett go 6 of 7, lead a touchdown drive. George Pickens cooking everybody. We'll get to how that happened, but let's break down why the first team offense looked so impressive. I go back to that drive. And you remember how all summer we've talked about, like, the Steelers, they're going to have an offensive line. They're going to run the ball. They're going to pound people into submission. This offense didn't pound the Buccaneers into submission. Now, reminder, Buccaneers have their backups, and they're not even supposed to be an elite team. This is all just taking one step at a time. And I re-emphasize this every time we see a practice, good or bad, or a preseason, good or bad. You analyze the moment, you put a pin in it, you store it for information, then you come back to the collective amount of moments that you've collected throughout the training camp and the preseason, and then you evaluate, okay, how many good days did they stack versus bad days? But this was a good day, objectively, no doubt about it. In the first drive, they come out. The Steelers, after the defense forcing a 3-and-out, Kenny Pickett hits Diontae Johnson short. He makes 2 guys miss, gets 8 yards, really solid. Then he moves the sticks again by hitting Pat Freiermuth short over the middle. A dump-off pass to Najee Harris where they had it covered, so it was a loss of 1. Jaylen Warren doesn't go anywhere in his run. Then Kenny Pickett I thought was a really solid play from him in a first down conversion or a third down conversion to Diontae Johnson for 11 yards where play wasn't there initially. He rolled to his right, used his feet, kept his eyes downfield, found Diontae Johnson beyond the sticks, and they moved the chains. And that was a really good moment because one of the things that I did have a criticism for Kenny Pickett from last season was that sometimes he used his legs before he needed to. And that just happens. You have happy feet, you're excited, you're trying to make a play, but you had to find how to use your legs in the right moments. And in that moment, it was the right moment. He did it. Good job there. Then Jaylen Warren, really good blocking the offensive line on this one play. I mean, he gets 10 yards from it. And we'll talk about a particular person who I thought blocked really well on that run later in this show. But he gets 11 yards, really solid. Or no, he gets 10 yards, really solid. And then Kenny Pickett hits Diontae Johnson again for a really solid gain. Jaylen Warren gets a couple yards here. But then the play of the night was Kenny Pickett hitting George Pickens for a 33-yard touchdown. Now, there were several steps to this play that was really impressive, and I'll explain why. George Pickens on this route, biggest thing about George Pickens that he had to work on going into this year was running his routes, was getting open, creating separation, and also winning certain different things. He's great at the combat catch, great at the end of the play when the ball's thrown to him. There's few people in the league that you want to be your guy going up to getting the ball over him. But what was, I thought, really impressive about that moment was how he made it work from the start to the finish. If you go back and you look at the play, there was a replay. If you didn't get the chance to watch the game, go back and look at the highlights. There was a replay angle that showed a really good angle of how the corner was up on top of him. And initially, he makes sure the corner can't press him. He gets to the outside. Then he's able to win back inside leverage with his route and presents a decent passing window for Kenny Pickett. Now, it was also important because I thought the cornerback actually did a good job sticking with George Pickens on this play. He creates a smaller passing window, but there is one that exists. And Kenny Pickett hits it in stride, looked routine, and he even talked about the play afterwards. Initially, he was looking to his left. He came back, saw Pickens, and the throw was on the money. It looked routine. And what does Mike Tomlin say a lot this training camp? You have to make routine plays routinely. And that play wasn't necessarily routine, but it looked that way. And I think it's a very good sign that the passing offense can do that at this point in the preseason and make a play like that. So awesome moment there. But then it wasn't done, because then George Pickens catches the ball, and immediately his brain goes from I caught the ball to I'm making the next guy miss. He gets past the defender who was covering him, and he knows he has one man to beat, and he sets him up immediately. He immediately starts to go outside, forces them to honor that he could go to the sideline, then immediately cuts back to the inside, makes the safety miss, and then he knows he just has a trot to the end zone, and he scores. It was a truly impressive play. And again, don't take this to the heavens and say that this is going to be, the Steelers are going 19-0 and winning the Super Bowl this year. But, and Mike Tomlin even said that after the game. He said as a Tomlinism, I think he said something along the lines of like, we're not going to wear our hands out by patting ourselves on the back. And very Tomlin is a moment there. But that the Steelers aren't going to take this too high. And Kenny Pickett even said it. He was like, it was a preseason game. It was one drive in a preseason game, but it was a pretty good drive. And I think that's a very good sign that the Steelers offense is at least they passed this test. And if they didn't pass this test, we'd be talking about, what's the problems? Oh man, this team they really didn't look good at all at training camp, did they, Chris? You were just making up stuff. There'd be all sorts of stuff. And so again, I'm not saying run to the heavens and put all your money down on the Steelers to win the Super Bowl, though I know some of you did, because I literally made this joke after the game. So we're all betting on the Super Bowl. Steelers winning the Super Bowl, right? People were like literally showing me their tickets. No, Chris, I have put money down on this, and I'm hoping they pull this off. I'm not saying do all that. What I am saying is that on this evening, August 11th, Friday, they came to Tampa Bay on a road game in a hot environment, and they did what they needed to do to show that they could be an efficient offense in this moment. That's all. No more, no less. But that's good, because do you know how many times the Steelers have come to a preseason game and have not looked sharp? And it used to happen a lot. It's good that it didn't happen in this one, and I think that the Steelers offense really looked good there. And I'll also say the Steelers backup offenses looked good. I want you to think back. If you're a Steelers fan who's like, you're crazy, like most people, like most football fans are crazy, and you watch every preseason game. Can you remember back to like the mid 2010s, and when Landry Jones would come into the game and how bored you would be because how bad the offense was and they couldn't move the ball at all? Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The backup offenses did not give you that. Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph led touchdown drives that were impressive. They had good moments. They moved the ball, and sure, nothing was perfect there, but they were at least interesting to watch. So a lot of good things to take away from this first preseason game, and we've only started just picking at the first team offense here. But bottom line for me, when I look at this first team offense and where they are, I want to put a pin in this thought. Have we been underestimating the passing game, the passing offense for the Steelers? Because all season long, all offseason, all preseason, all training camp, we were talking about this team is going to grind it out. They were going to bully people with this offensive run game, and they still might. But let's put a pin in the thought that maybe the passing offense is better than we were giving it credit. And if it is, maybe the whole narrative that we've been talking about for about 2 years, that Matt Canada wasn't really given the chance to actually do what he wanted to do with the offense, maybe there was some credibility to that. But again, pins in these things. These are not definite takes. These aren't hard takes. These aren't even takes. These are thoughts that I had while watching this team play on this one preseason game in an early August evening. That's all they are. But if we get other nights that line up with them, we will readdress those pins that we've put on our board here. All that to say, we're not overreacting, but this is a good night. And there were a lot of other good things here. It wasn't just the first team offense. There were people on the second team, third team offenses and defense we'll talk about. I want to focus on the rookies for a second, because that was a big storyline going into this season, was what the Steelers could do with their rookie class that Omar Khan in his first draft could assemble. And I thought across the board, they had a pretty doggone good evening. We'll talk about that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We got a lot more to discuss about the Steelers' first preseason win in this bonus episode. But first, I want to remind you guys that this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager on your small businesses, much like a high-stake wager would feel on betting on the Steelers right now to win the Super Bowl just because of a preseason game. Reminder, don't do it. But you need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinders. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond. It's the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and you can spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our talking about the Steelers' opening preseason win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 27-17. But let's talk about the rookie specifically. And let's go down the board here. We'll go down from the early picks to some of the middle picks here. In general, I thought they all looked good. From the guys that I was really taking a closer look at. I still haven't looked at, full all 22 or anything like that. I haven't gotten a chance to fully evaluate. I watched the game just like the rest of you all. Then I collected my thoughts and did this show. But all in all, I ain't got nothing really bad to say too much about the rookies. Broderick Jones didn't go on the first team, but he was there from the second to the fourth team, which that shows me that Mike Tomlin was testing him to see, I don't want to just see you win one play or one drive or a couple drives. I want to see how you do throughout a game. And for most of the game, Broderick Jones, I thought, did very well. He was good in run blocking. He was good for the most part in pass blocking. There was one play in the fourth quarter where he was called for a hold, which he did hold, but it was a play that he lost on. But it was one of those things where, like, if it was a kind of a non-blatant hold, like he didn't wrap his defender and take him down and do all these things that made it obvious. All he did was kind of like hold on to the interior part of his frame. And that's what sometimes you might get away with in the game. And again, it was on the fourth team at the end of the game when he had been out there for a while. It gave the Steelers a chance to look at a teachable moment so they could say, hey, Broderick, what'd you do wrong in this play? Let's look at this. And I think that is kind of beneficial to coaching because they can say, hey, you may feel that you did great tonight. Let me show you where you didn't do great. This is this moment here. But there were also a lot of really good moments for him where he looked very comfortable in pass protection and in run blocking. And I thought that translated very well for the Steelers on the night. Still don't think it's obvious that he's going to take Dan Moore Jr.'s job yet, but I do think that he's put himself in a position that maybe if he does well in practice this next week, the Steelers do give him at least a chance with the first-team offense in the second game of the preseason. We'll see if that plays out. That'll be something to watch there. But one guy who I do think absolutely dominated, well, two guys actually. I guess three guys if we throw them all in there, where the Steelers' second and third and fourth round picks. Now, Joey Porter Jr. didn't play, so can't evaluate him. But the rest of these guys, I ain't have a negative thing to say about them. Keeanu Benton ate people for dinner in this game. There was one play where he had a TFL where he just shook the center. It was a 1st and 20 play, I think, in the second quarter, and he just put a move on the center, got into the backfield, and it was like, where you going, buddy? I'm taking this play. And he just stuffs the runner in the backfield. And he did that more than a few times. There was a really impressive series where he had a really good play on first down, and then on fourth down, it was 4th and short, and the Buccaneers wanted to run the ball, and he just collapsed the line of scrimmage, and it made a play. It made space for Isaiah Loudermilk to come in and finish the play, which he did, and he also had a really good night. But Keanu Benton looked strong, and I think he's made a case for maybe the Steelers should give him a first-team look in this next preseason game. Montravius Adams was there, and I thought he did it okay. Nothing bad against him. But Keanu Benton is the future for the Steelers on the defensive line. One of the futures. I think that Marvin Leal is also in the future. He also looked really good in this game. But Keanu Benton as a rookie, I was looking at him closely because I wanted to see how he did as a rookie. and he did well. And I really think the Steelers might be in a very good position for the youth on their defensive line for the future that Cam Hayward might be passing off the baton in the next few years here on the Steelers roster. Another guy who I thought looked good, we'll switch back to the offense, and then we'll get to the guy on defense that I really want to talk about. But Darnell Washington only caught up one pass for 9 yards, but looked solid in doing so. Good route, got open, made the catch, made the play, solid. Mike Tomlin even dapped him up a little bit after that. But there was one play, I think it was on the Jalen Warren 10-yard run, where I saw a replay angle, and you see the offensive line kind of blocking their guys, and then you just see this one defender just go, oh, I'm being pushed all the way over, and it was Darnell Washington crushing somebody's soul and just bulldozing them out of the way so that Jalen Warren could get his gain. That's the Darnell Washington Steelers wanted in the draft. That's who we've been talking about in practice, who beat TJ Watt in some reps, who has looked strong. And he caught a pass. I thought he did himself some really good favors, and I thought he put himself in a position where maybe he should be higher up in the depth chart for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward. Now, he has more to prove. He has a lot more reps to go, but for how he's responded to the test the Steelers have given him, Darnell Washington is doing a good job. I thought that was that. But let's talk about the guy who I think you got. If you watch the game, you know I'm about to talk about here on defense. But we got to talk about Nick Herbig. This guy. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? I mean, he came from Wisconsin, and he has a brother. But to get what I'm getting at here, 3 tackles and a sack and a half, he was bringing it. And you're seeing the elements of what we've been talking about in training camp here. Solid technique, solid moves in the moment, and then not like losing his head afterwards, sticking to, hey, I got to stick to my next play here. And then you could even hear Missy Matthews, said, Mike Tomlin after Nick Herbig got his second sack was like, does anyone else have a younger brother out there? Because of course, Nick Herbig has his older brother, Nick Herbig, and, Hayward's got the Hayward brothers and everything out there. But Nick Herbig is looking really good for a 4th round pick rookie at this point. And it's starting to put the idea that, hey, maybe the Steelers have gotten really good at drafting edge rushers, because sure, they have their guys who, haven't worked out over the years, your Jarvis Joneses or whatever, but they picked TJ Watt 30th when they picked him, and now he's the best edge rusher in football. They picked Alex Highsmith in the 3rd round, and now he's one of the better edge rushers in football. And now they got this rookie Nick Herbig in the 4th round. And again, just preseason, and it's just been training camp, and it's not everything. And I'm trying to preface all of this because some people say, oh, you're overreacting. No, I'm not. I'm just analyzing the moments that I'm given. And when I'm stacking up all the moments through training camp and this first preseason game, Nick Herbig has aced all the tests that I could have for a 4th round graded guy. And he's looking really good at this part of the process. So no complaints there. I think that he looked really good, as did Benton. The Wisconsin defenders, man, they're making plays. Isaiah Loudermilk also looked good. This is a Steelers defensive resource of Wisconsin. Man, I need to start looking up who Wisconsin's got, as far as who they're recruiting out of high school right now, because they might be coming down the pipeline in 4 more years. Who knows? But point being, across the board, I thought the Steelers rookies had a good night. And again, it's just one good night. They can't, as Mike Tomlin said, they can't, wear their hands out, patting themselves on the back. But I don't think they will, because that's not what Mike Tomlin said. And you hear Kenny Pickett echoing those thoughts in his post-game press conference. He said a very similar thing there. And, you talk about how we always talk about how, of all your complaints of Mike Tomlin, there's one thing you can't doubt, is that he is a leader of men, and that he is a great leader of men, and that people follow his word. And I think that's what you're looking at here when you're looking at the Steelers and you're seeing them. They often they repeat the thoughts that he's talking about, the concepts that he's preaching, they are feeling. So all in all, feeling really good about that. But there were some things to not feel good about in this preseason game. I'll go over those in the 3rd segment, as well as some other notes that I had on the game here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this break. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. I've talked a lot about positive things, and I always try to balance my show. So let's talk about some things that weren't necessarily positive. The first and most obvious thing was, oh boy, Kendrick Green did not look good. And I say this as a person who The Steelers, I think, have put a lot into trying to give him confidence boosts to find ways to bring something out of him, because it's obvious that this guy wants to be good. It's not about a lack of will to want to get better. It's not a lack of work ethic, and it's not even a lack of athleticism, because there's some things that he does very well. Like, that's why they put him at fullback, and he's like crushing people, and he's moving well, and he can kind of get on the run really well. But it's just further and further evidence that he is not good coming out of his stance and needing to establish leverage at the line of scrimmage. And maybe that's his lower body, maybe his upper body, whatever it is. Kendrick Green was getting his butt kicked. And he got called for a hold on a key play. On the same drive, he had a very bad snap, because, and oftentimes when you see bad snaps happen, it means the guy's either they're overcompensating for a physical ailment or a problem that they're having, or they're just too lost in the sauce because they're losing battles and they're letting those losses on the field on the previous plays kind of leak into their thoughts a little bit and mess up the routine parts of their play that they should be hanging on to. And he had a bad snap, I think it was to Mason Rudolph, and it was just a rough moment. And it brings in a real question about Kendrick Green. Can the Steelers afford for him to be the number 2 center if he's looking like that? And I say this because it's like, look, Mason Cole, I think, is pretty solid at center. I think he's done a really good job, and we've talked about that before, and we'll even talk about that a little bit more this week, because one of you called in with a question about Mason Cole in his future, and I'll answer that in a later episode that we'll do during the week, during the normal hours of this show. But behind Mason Cole, you need help. The Steelers were very lucky that they didn't ever have to start someone behind him last year, even though there were days where literally he was in a walking boot in the locker room during the week leading up to the game, and then he would come out of it and he'd play well, didn't miss a start, even though he had injuries he suffered. You cannot bank on that. And, we talked about how backup outside linebacker and backup inside linebacker were key needs for the Steelers in the offseason to address, and they addressed them. They got Marcus Golden. They went and got a whole bunch of linebackers: Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts, Quan Alexander, even Nick Kwiatkowski, who I thought looked really good, by the way. Both Quan Alexander and Kwiatkowski and Mark Robinson. I think now all of a sudden the linebacker position might be a good situation for the Steelers. But again, back to my point here about the backup center, I think that's the new position that the Steelers need to at least look at and see how they can address. Because if Kendrick Green does not improve, and it doesn't mean that he won't improve, he can improve, he can play better. But man, this is the year 3, and he looked out of sorts. And you cannot be in a position where your entire offense crumples because one player gets hurt on the offensive line and you don't have the guy to replace them. Now, maybe it could be Nate Herbig. Maybe he can play in there. Maybe someone can fill in. But you need somebody to step up. If you don't have them on the roster, Omar Khan should make some moves. They still have some salary cap space. You can make a trade. You can sign somebody that's still out there. You can wait for other cuts to happen at the end of preseason. Something. But unless Kendrick Green shows something, Steelers need to do something at backup center, because that will be a problem if Mason Cole misses a game, and it could lead to some serious issues for the Steelers offense. Other players who caught my eye in a not good way, Quincy Roche, who was brought back to the Steelers. If you remember, he was drafted by the Steelers last year in the 6th round, was decent last year, a little bit of promises here and there, but they tried to hide him on the practice squad. He got scooped up by the Giants, was there for a hot second, didn't work out, and then now he's back with the Steelers, and he's been okay in training camp. He hasn't been noticeable, but he did not look good in this game. Neither David Perales, some of the backup edge rusher guys the Steelers were using, they took bad angles, and David Perales, there was one play where he took a bad angle and then he wasn't fast enough to recover from his bad angle in chasing down Baker Mayfield, and that led to a problem. Quincy Roche also had some plays like that. There was one play where he even stayed in position for a play action and a bootleg, and then he missed the sack in the backfield, and if he had just brought him down, I would have been like, okay, solid play. That's what you want to see, but didn't see that. So not a great night from him. Cody White, there was an interception that Mitch Trubisky threw. I also thought this was a good ball for Mitch Trubisky. It was down the sideline. It gave Cody White a fighting chance. It was even in a position where the only way it could be intercepted was if it got tipped into the air, and Cody White didn't bring it down, or at least make sure the defender couldn't bring it down, and that's exactly what happened. He didn't bring it down, and then he didn't make sure the defender couldn't bring it down, and it was an interception. And I thought Cody White could have came up with that, and he dropped one of those routine plays, had a good route, got open, let the ball slip right through his hands. this is a tight wide receiver room right now as far as the competition goes. And if he wants to make the team, he needs to make sure that he shows as few of those problems as possible. There are only so many spots. I'm pretty sure that, especially after Calvin Austin's bomb, we'll talk about that in a second here too as well. But you have, we've talked about this, Diontae Johnson, who I thought looked really good, George Pickens, who looked amazing, Allen Robinson, who didn't have to play as much in this one. Those three guys, they're definitely on the roster, as is Calvin Austin. So it's really down to the 5th spot and the 6th spot in the wide receiver room. And if you want to make a case for yourself, you cannot be making mistakes at this point, especially Cody White, who's been on the Steelers roster for a bit. So rough night from him. Hakeem Butler, nothing like, ridiculous, but he did have another routine drop, and that's just his problem his whole career. That's why he's on the Steelers. He was signed out of the XFL because he just wasn't consistent enough. And we saw that in this game. He has 2 more preseason games. Maybe he changes that. But as far as this preseason game, wasn't good. Now, other guys that caught my eyes that I thought were good, I got to talk about that bomb from Mason Rudolph to Calvin Austin, because first of all, Mason Rudolph deserves a lot of credit. I know a lot of people don't like Mason Rudolph for whatever reason, but listen, that dude has gone through it in his career with the Steelers. This is a guy who came in, but when he was drafted, you had the starting quarterback and the franchise quarterback who's going in the Hall of Fame kind of saying, I don't think we should have drafted that guy. I mean, that's a lot of pressure to have on you when you first get it. Then he finally gets a chance to start in his second year, and he's starting to play well, and then he gets literally knocked out by Earl Thomas to the point that they have to remove his face mask and put him on a cart, and it just looks rough for him. Then eventually he gets back in that year, and just when you think he might be doing something, he has a rough game against Cleveland. Then Myles Garrett assaults him and then accuses him of using a slur, and then that leads one thing to another. And he's they never get to the bottom of it, but then it's just kind of just out there. And then when he finally gets back after that, he's playing okay against the Jets, and then he gets his collarbone broke. And then, that was the last time we really got to see Mason Rudolph do too much. And then even when he got a chance to start in 2021, I think it was against the Lions, when they tied the Lions, he had a not bad game. It was a good game for a backup quarterback, but he had Diontae Johnson and Pat Freiermuth, I believe, fumble late in that game in plays that if they don't fumble, they probably win that game. So I've always felt that Mason Rudolph, I'm not saying that everyone should feel bad for him or that he's, this superstar in the making, but I've always felt that he's like a decent backup NFL quarterback, and that, because there's been some unlucky situations for him, people have kind of been harder on him than anyone else. But all in all, Mason Rudolph in this game looked solid. And, I go back through this game and I look at what happened. He was 7 of 12 for 132 yards and a touchdown. And that bomb that he threw to Calvin Austin was on the money. And he was facing pressure at different points of the game. I thought he might be the best 3rd string quarterback in the NFL this year. So that's a pretty good situation to have for Mason Rudolph. Calvin Austin, by the way, took some runs on some jet sweeps, got some good yards there. He had 23 yards on the ground, and then he had 73 yards, in the air, including that 67-yard touchdown catch that he had from Mason Rudolph. And it was one of those examples of when Calvin Austin, we talk about his speed, that's what we're saying. If you look at that play, the cornerback gave him plenty of cushion. The cornerback gave him space and said, I'm not going to let him sneak behind me. And then he snuck behind him. Why? Because Calvin Austin is really, 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 really fast, and he can get loose, and he does get open like that. And if the Steelers can hit on that with maybe like a few times this year, it will scare defenses into honoring that, and it will open up other things in the offense. So again, good things. So Calvin Austin, have yourself a night. And also that was his first Steelers preseason game ever, because he didn't play in any last year. He didn't even get to the second week of training camp last year. So good stuff for him to see that he's still moving in the right directions there. Other guys who I thought impressed, Mark Robinson, I thought looked really solid when he was making tackles. He's making progress. Still liability in the pass game, but who wasn't a liability in the pass game was Nick Kwiatkowski. Now, I do think his shoulder popped out. That's purely speculation. We don't have an official report on that. All we know is a shoulder injury, but he made a play on a 3rd down play where they went after him. They threw after him, and I think it was a tight end. He frames him up properly, kind of gets in his hip pocket, turns, looks for the ball, and makes it like, hey, like, you're going to have to throw the greatest pass of all time to fit this past me. It turned out to be incomplete, led to a 4th down. But when he came down on his shoulder, and it just looked immediately the way he reached for it. It just reminded me of guys when I've seen their shoulder pop out, and then he kind of came up holding it. That didn't look great, but I thought in the moments that he was asked to play that he looked very good. And it's going to be an interesting decision to see who they want to keep at linebacker because Quan Alexander looked good, Landon Roberts looked good, and Cole Holcomb looked good. That was a good day from a lot of people there. So Quan Alexander, by the way, was beasted. There was a penalty that he got, but it was one of those penalties where he just came in and he was aiming for the chest, but his helmet just tipped the bottom of the running back's face mask. So technically it was a contact to the head. But that, as Mike Tomlin would say, is I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em moment, because basically he's like, hey, Quan, great play, good emphasis. You delivered the hit. Just let's watch our head placement there. Maybe keep your head up, and then that way it's like a little bit different there. But either way, really good. Isaiah Loudermilk also looked good, and can't forget Anthony McFarland with his touchdown run. Thought he looked solid as well. We have a lot more to break down as the week goes on here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll be back Sunday. There is a Sunday training camp practice that I will be at, so I'll be there. And then afterwards, you'll get my thoughts on that and the game heading into the Monday episode, and then we'll get you ready for the second week of preseason as things roll on here. But we hope that you enjoyed this bonus episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast, breaking down the Steelers' 27-17 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll have more thoughts and everything else as the week rolls on here. Thanks again, everybody. I'm going to take a day off here on Saturday because I'm recording this Friday night, try to take some time to myself, and then get ready to be back out in the hot sun at Latrobe on Sunday and get you my thoughts there from training camp. Thanks again, everybody. I'll see you here back on the Locked On Steelers podcast on Monday and talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers.